Hello, beautiful seekers, and welcome to our moon magic for the full blue moon in Taurus on October 31st on Halloween. Very symbolic, right? This moon is rich with symbolism, it's rich with energy, it is rich with death and rebirth elements. It's kind of the quintessential transmutation moon if you really think about all the elements that are going in with it together. So we're going to talk through this and the way that I understand this kind of transmutational energy and how to work with it. I think on the internet right now, many of you I'm sure follow different accounts and different conversations, and so you've already heard a bit about this moon and what it's bringing to you. It's garnered quite a big reputation. And I always like to take it like a level even deeper. We have the overarching conversation that we can all look at these aspects and say this is what's going on. And then we want to take it deeper. So what do we do with that? How do we connect with that? What's really going on? If this is what this moon is bringing out, then what's really going on underneath the surface? And that is just what we are going to do here today with this very symbolic transmutational full moon. Now, blue moon happens when there's 2 full moons in 1 calendar month. Doesn't really mean too much. The Julian calendar isn't particularly meaningful in when it comes to the lunar cycle. But it's still kind of cool, right? It's a blue moon, and of course it's happening on Halloween. And a moon cycle, we tend to work with full moon energy for 2 or 3 days. It's happening here on the 31st and into the 1st and the 2nd. These 3 days, depending on what way you celebrate, Halloween is on the 31st and All Souls Days is on November 1st and 2nd. All 3 of these days really speak to this communing with the other side, with our spiritual selves, and also with death and rebirth. And this full moon in Taurus obviously highlights the axis of birth and death. Taurus full moon is about birth. It's about fecundity. It's about Venusian energy as the mother in the earth, as a mother in us being physical beings, right? And how we nurture and nourish ourselves into that. And of course, Scorpio is all about, and the sun is over there opposing the moon, is all about transmutation, transformation, the taboo, the hidden, and death. So that axis right away is getting us to the crux of creative energy, the crux of how we create, how we hold on, and how we let go. And even though Taurus and Scorpio are fixed signs, right? This is a fixed sign moon, which means the growth that we are going to sustain over the long haul, right? This moon is also about if we are going to have sustainable growth, if we are going to grow into what we are envisioning for ourselves as we go through this full moon cycle. We have to also be willing to let transmutation happen with us. Sustainable growth is not about holding tight and sticking it through and never changing anything, right? Sustainable growth is going to be about incorporating some transmutation. Now, there's a couple of things that make this particular Halloween full moon extra powerful, and it has to do with Uranus, our dear friend Uranus over in Taurus. That's conjunct. The moon and Uranus are conjunct. They are both at 8 degrees of Taurus. For those of you who have Taurus energy or follow me and listen to the Taurus monthly horoscopes, you will know that we have been working with Uranus energy over in the Taurus family for a long time, for a little while here. And we've been playing with what that means to be working with this energy. And we've been kind of focusing a lot, I feel like, over the last months on Saturn, on Pluto, on Jupiter, on all the stuff happening in Capricorn. But Uranus is doing some really important things to us and with us on a cultural level and also on an individual level. So let's talk about what this moon then is getting activated when it comes to Uranus, when it comes to what we're doing with Uranus. Now, Uranus is a planet about disruption, it's about revolution, evolution, the unexpected, electricity, innovation. So Uranus doesn't want to do things, just keep status quo and say, okay, we're good. Uranus is curious about what happens when we add electricity to something, when we are curious enough to advance into something, innovate in our lives, innovate how we're doing something. Now that electrical energy in Taurus, the mother Venusian energy that wants us to be creative, that wants us to feel at home in our bodies, that wants us to connect with a deep sense of self-love and groundedness, and a sense of self-value, self-worth, self-love. I mean, it really goes to the heart of that creative process. When he's here, he wants us to innovate and to come back home to our bodies and to be really aware that these bodies and our physical and those things like self-worth and self-respect, those are technologies in a way. And those technologies can be used for the greater good or for our own detriment. And I think we've all found that in our lives when there have been times when we have used the technology of our thoughts and our self-value and the way we connect with our body as something that helped us and we felt really empowered, and times where we felt really disempowered and almost destructive within that framework. So it is quite an intense combo. And Uranus is going to be in Taurus for many years to come, so we're working with this energy even past this full moon. But the full moon is going to be highlighting this. And because of this, there are key words that came to mind when I sat with this full moon. 3 words: courage, transmutation, and focus. I also had a note that came up that this is a moon of transformation via sudden change, electrical transmutation, and shaking loose. And I don't want you to get overwhelmed by me saying this. We don't like to hear, as humans, we don't like to hear shaking loose. We don't like to hear electrical transmutation, many of us, right? We hear that, we think, oh no, somebody's gonna come over and hit me on the side of the head with something. Something's gonna strike me down. And I want to focus on the fact that this moon, a Taurus moon, is always going to want to support you into grounding into and really owning who you are. It's a very stubborn energy. It's a very strong, proud, focused energy. And it wants you to focus in on it. So it's going to shake you to get you to focus. It's not shaking you to get you rattled and off into 10 different avenues. So normally, I think when we have energy like this, Uranus energy, shaking everything up, and the full moon bringing up emotion, bringing up questions around self-love, self-value, creativity, worthiness, safety, and we get shaken up in that. We normally want to retreat into ourselves. We want to go to the haunted house. We want to go to the old wirings in our brain that tell us this is bad, this is good. You're having this feeling, you should be scared. Oh, you're feeling like your life is shaking into a new phase. You feel like you're innovating. You feel like you're stepping into change. You feel like you're transmuting. You feel like your sense of home and what you identify with is shifting. Oh, we should be scared. But this is where I want to peel that layer off and look a little deeper. Doesn't have to be scary. This can be a place where we can lean into the curiosity. And this is why the word focus is so important here. There might be a lot of noise. This moon is very crackling. It is extremely potent energy. And I do recommend take care of yourselves. The whole weekend around this full moon, try your best to be kind to yourself. This is a very sensitive time of year. Scorpionic energy opens us all up to a lot going on. Take good care of yourselves. Nurture yourselves. There can be a lot of noise. There can be a lot of crackling. This is a very lightning storm kind of moon. But there is something for each of us in this moon that has us coming back to a point of focus. Coming back to a deeper sense of truth. And that is going to be individual for each of you. But it's going to be tempting to latch on to all the noise. Everybody else's thoughts, everybody else's things going on. The collective anxiety. And it is interesting timing, I'll admit. The full moon happening right before some big things in the political process, and some big things culturally right now for the whole world. I admit there is something really intense about that. But part of what I do here and the work I do on this, in this space that we create here together, and thank you for being here with me, is to come back to ourselves and come back to the medicine we can create within ourselves, right? That is what I want us to always be working with, because this is the place that we can come back to and understand. So when I'm talking about this, keep in mind that we're talking about how you can find those points of focus from within yourself. And so instead of getting afraid of this innovation, this transmutation, this electrical energy, get curious about it and focus in, because there's probably only going to be one or two things that really matter informationally about this full moon. It's not asking you to get scattered. It's not asking you to put out 100 threads and deal with the influx of information. It's asking you to use this electrical information, this transmutational energy, this skin shedding energy, to get you locked into your own creative cycle. And that's really important here. Now, I have one other aspect to keep in mind in the background of this moon that's pretty influential and kind of highlights some of the murkiness that can come with a full moon like this. And that is that Mercury is 3 days away from finishing its retrograde. It will be at 26 degrees of Libra, and it's squaring Saturn in Capricorn at 26 degrees. So Mercury retrograde is squaring off against Saturn. And this can feel confusing, right? It can feel confusing about what is good for you foundationally and what is just restrictive. It's asking us to review some things when it comes to self-discipline, when it comes to authoritarianism, when it comes to control, and things that have to do with masculine control and heavy-handedness. And that isn't just in the collective, that's also within ourselves, right? So you have this Taurus full moon, which is the mother moon energy in the mother Venusian energy of creativity, of ease, of self-respect, of self-worth, of leaning into that natural, very, very natural creative impulse to make and build and create, and with Uranus there to innovate. And then you have this square happening in the background that is looking at the inner masculine that is punishing, that is restrictive, that is squashing our impulses. And with Mercury retrograde squaring off there, this is a time of review. And in many ways, that conversation with Saturn and the full moon in Taurus are asking us, once again, you know, these moons love to do this, to look at our self-parenting, look at our self-fathering, and look at our self-mothering, and just noticing, you know, where we are beating ourselves down with shame, with guilt. Maybe in this electrical transmutational, curious, innovative full moon, you may be feeling really free. You may be feeling really free-spirited, really hopeful, really curious, really wild. All of these things agitating up out of you and coming out of you. And that Saturn voice in the background may be like, yeah, but is that really a good idea? Are you really allowed to innovate? Are you really allowed to imagine a world where we create social networks and safety nets for each other, where we help each other out? Are you really allowed to be that artist that creates and writes music, or writes books, or creates that community center? Are you really allowed to be that heart-centered, beautiful vision of yourself that you want to share with others? Are you really allowed to nurture yourself and slow down a little bit? Are you really? And that is actually a really important thing to keep in mind here. If you notice that voice getting loud, give it a moment, but then remember to come back to the focus of the Taurus full moon, is what I would say. You know, we're closing out Saturn in Capricorn. And sometimes these moments where Saturn gets a moment to highlight his work in Capricorn, he wants to come in and kind of take over the conversation, but the reign of the energy of Saturn and Capricorn is closing out. And soon those lessons, yes, we've learned a lot, we've grown a lot, but they don't get to be center stage very soon. We're weeks away from a huge shift in energy, actually into energy that is Aquarian, which is very much about that Uranus electricity. So get ready for that. This moon is kind of prescient, and you may find that you have really prescient visions of what's next. Now I'm going to pull one final card from my Animal Totem Tarot. I used this for the monthly readings, which you haven't seen yet. They're coming out on October 25th. And I love this deck. It's really beautiful, and I want to pull one card for this full moon. This is such a moon tied to the natural cycle in our physical and our spiritual world. It really comes back to the basics of spiritual creativity and transmutation. So it's powerful stuff. And we have strength, which is really interesting, right? Because it's an oxen. And normally in a regular tarot deck, strength is associated with Leo, with the lion. It has a woman standing with a lion, learning to harness energy in a long-lasting way. But of course, this is a Taurus full moon, and we are on this using this deck. And so we're looking at strength as the ox, which is really associated with Taurus and the beauty of Taurus energy. And when I see this card and I think about strength, you know, it's about the long game. It's not about what you're going to get done at the end of 2020. It's about what you want to sustain you moving forward for a very long time. It's about what you want to build over time. It's about what's really worth you pulling along with you, right? It's about what's really worth you taking your sacred energy and carrying with you and moving forward. And there's a real parsing through here of that. It's okay to be selective in that. That's part of self-respect and self-value and self-love. It's also okay to forge forward at this time. It's okay to desire creativity, growth, travel, change, and building into what matters to you. There is a very strong, loud voice right now that is cataclysmic and says that this is the end of the world. It is. And, you know, we've had some conversations around the word apocalypse and how that means to uncover, to unveil, to reveal, to show, to change, to shift. And there's a lot of people talking about how we'll never be the same. You know, this year's changing us. That's always the case. Every year changes us profoundly. This year has been quite the magnitude of hit. I will agree with that. And that's true, but that voice that says that everything is shaking down to the ground doesn't take into account that shaking loose also allows for greater creativity, and we are allowed to keep using our hearts and our beauty and our inner Taurus Venusian vision of the future. Vision of what we want to bring into earth. It's really, and that's what I'm saying, this moon is very crackling, it's very loud, there's a lot going on, you can feel very porous, and you may want to get sucked into some of the more agitated energy. But that's where focus comes in. You really have to choose at this time to be courageous and brave and face into that and choose your vision of beauty for the world. We need that, each of us, just for our own well-being and also for the process of this world that we are living in and that we want to give birth to moving forward. And that does require a resolve and a commitment and a strength that I think it's undervalued sometimes, to keep believing and keep dreaming and keep bringing into the world the beauty that you have within you, when all these other voices are telling you that the pain and the powers that are inflicting pain are the ones who get the final word. I don't want to buy into that and let them have that. So that's where this moon is really potent on an individual and a collective level. And I just love that the strength card came up. So we're going to be doing a much bigger activation specifically tied to how to work with this moon to make it a creative process for you on my Patreon. So if you're looking for extra support, I'd love to see you over there. On Halloween, we are going to do a really beautiful ritual together that you can take with you for the rest of 2020. And we'll, of course, be finishing up Mars retrograde, Mercury retrograde, all the great stuff coming up. So I'd really love to see you there for that if you're looking for support. I'll leave the link below. You can find me on my website and on my Instagram, and you can also find PinkLune's gorgeous jewelry on her Etsy shop. I'll leave all of those in the description box. Have a beautiful full moon in Taurus. I feel like I'm already feeling this moon, and it's a week away. It is quite the event of the year, I would say. It's a very rare moon, so take it in, and I love you so much, beautiful seekers.